Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little claustrophobic. Imagine this: you open your eyes, except there's no light. Your breath? Shallow. Every inhale brings the heavy scent of damp, packed earth. You try to move, but your arms won't stretch farther than a few inches in any direction. Above your face, maybe 6, maybe 10 inches of dense soil pressed down like a weight made of centuries. You're underground, buried, and very much not dead. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you realize, besides the sheer wrongness of waking up buried, is that your body wants to panic. And panic, in this case, is death. Real, final, throat-tightening death. Every gasp you take in sheer terror burns through precious air you absolutely cannot afford to waste. There's a soft thumping in your chest that threatens to thunder if you let it. And that's the trick, isn't it? You can't let it. Your fingers twitch upward, brush coarse, moist soil. There's no casket. No lining. Nothing ceremonial about this. Just raw dirt, crumbling in little clods when you shift. Probably a shallow grave, if you're lucky, though lucky isn't a word you'd really want to toss around here. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, fragments of memory are drifting in. A village, maybe? Cobblestones? There was a sickness, maybe? Or a trial? A torchlit hall. The hiss of whispers. A gloved hand. It's all fogged and incomplete, the way dreams dissolve in daylight. But daylight isn't getting in here. You try to recall something useful. Like how many cubic centimeters of oxygen a human needs to survive. Not that your brain is great at math right now. Oxygen deprivation tends to fog up the logic circuits. But you've read somewhere that an average person consumes about 550 liters of oxygen a day. You have, probably less than that. You close your mouth, force your breathing into slow, shallow pulls, letting your diaphragm do most of the work. It feels counterintuitive, like you're drowning in dirt instead of water, but you need to slow everything down. One breath. Pause. Another. You start counting. Because counting keeps your mind from spiraling into that one thought: you shouldn't be here. But here you are. And funny enough, it's happened before. Not to you, of course, but to many. Especially during the medieval period, when the line between dead and mostly dead was thinner than a monk's belt. Medicine back then was, shall we say, a mixed bag. If you collapsed with a faint heartbeat or shallow breath, there's a good chance some well-meaning friar or relative tossed a cloth over your face, crossed themselves, and called it a day. You might think they'd notice if you were still twitching, but sometimes they did, and it didn't matter. Because the fear of illness, especially during plague years, could make even the kindest souls shovel dirt faster than a grave digger with a deadline. People weren't exactly generous with their waiting periods. If you looked dead, smelled dead, or might become dead soon, they buried you. And here you are now, wrapped in the echo of that old terror. The dirt around your cheeks is soft, not yet settled. That's either good, or very bad. A recent burial means less compacted earth. Which might mean you weren't down here long. Or maybe they buried you in haste. Or maybe this is just a nightmare. The kind where your subconscious plays tricks with medieval history podcasts you fell asleep to and some half-remembered Edgar Allan Poe. The soundscape is a symphony of nothing. The occasional pulse in your ear. The creak of your own bones when you shift. You recall reading once, probably while doom-scrolling late at night, that some people in history were buried with bells attached to their hands. Not out of kindness, mind you, but because they were buried just in case. Just in case they weren't really gone. That's a thought you file away for later. Maybe you can summon that memory to keep you sane. Or at least busy. You try again to move your hand. Your right arm is pinned at the elbow, your left a little looser. You dig at the soil gently, testing. It gives way a bit. It's moist, heavy with water. That's good. Or bad. Moist dirt weighs more, but it also holds pockets. Maybe, just maybe, you're in one of those shallow graves dug quick during a crisis. Your lips are dry. You taste earth. There's that gritty, bitter flavor of minerals and something organic. You push your tongue against your teeth to keep yourself from gagging. No good hyperventilating now. You need to think. And while thinking, a new thought claws its way up like a weed. You remember something from a strange book, One of those weirdly specific ones that probably only 15 people have read. It talked about medieval monks who trained for moments like this. Not because they feared death, but because they sought it. They would lie in holes, practicing detachment, stillness, breathing shallow and slow. Some would even bury themselves under a thin layer of earth and meditate for hours. It was a ritual, a test of endurance and spiritual power, a way of preparing for the tomb, and maybe outsmarting it. You can't help but think, did one of them ever not make it out? Did they lie still a little too long? Did the soil shift 1 inch too far? The funny thing is, historians still argue whether some of these practices were metaphorical, symbolic rituals, or if people actually climbed into graves just to practice dying. It's one of those blurry spots in the record, where the line between belief and behavior vanishes. You shift again cautiously. The soil caves inward slightly. You freeze. Hold your breath. Let the dirt resettle. One wrong move and the pocket around your face might collapse. And then, well, no pressure. You press your tongue against the roof of your mouth to stop it trembling. Calm. Just like the monks. Breathe in. 2 seconds. Breathe out. 3. Again. You're going to need every medieval trick in the book to make it out of this. And lucky for you, the weirdest is yet to come. It dawns on you, somewhere between the gritty exhale and the 7th deliberate breath, that you're not 6 feet under. You just can't be. The pressure isn't right. The temperature isn't either. If this really were a full-depth grave, you'd feel the full, crushing weight of hundreds of pounds of earth smothering you like a medieval blanket woven from regrets. Instead, the dirt shifts. It crumbles. It lets you breathe, just barely. That, oddly, is the first glimmer of hope. Because, fun fact, most graves in medieval Europe weren't 6 feet deep. That hole, 6 feet under, thing? Much later. Much cleaner. A post-plague hygiene recommendation, not a standard. Your average peasant burial in the 14th century might be as shallow as 3 or 4 feet. Less if the digger was tired, drunk, or in a hurry, which, let's be honest, he probably was. Grave digging wasn't a job you did because you loved dirt. You did it because your other options had dried up or died off. And in times of disease, war, or a good old-fashioned witch panic, the number of graves to dig skyrocketed. That meant quick work. Hasty coverage. Sometimes multiple bodies in one pit, which, let's just agree, you really hope isn't your case. So yes, you're likely in a shallow grave. Maybe 2 feet of soil above. Maybe less. If you really stretch your arm, you might touch air. But you don't stretch, not yet. Because disturbing the roof might cave in the ceiling. And then all bets are off. Instead, you feel around slowly. Palms brushing across your body, checking. Clothes? Yes. A thick woolen shift. Medieval in style. No zippers. No metal buttons. Rough stitching at the collar, probably hand-sewn. And there's something else. Around your neck, a cord. Not twine. Leather. A pendant maybe? No time to inspect, but it's oddly cold for something pressed to your skin. And speaking of cold, your skin is clammy. The kind of chill that only comes from being underground. Or from death. But your heart is still doing its panicked hummingbird impression, so you're not dead. Yet. You wiggle your toes. Bare feet. Dirt packed loosely around the ankles. Not buried with boots. Curious. Were you punished? Or just poor? Or maybe both? Another fun little historical twist. Certain medieval communities practiced premature burial as a punishment. Not full burial, just partial. Symbolic. You'd be tossed into a grave, maybe up to your neck or chest, and left overnight as a lesson. Public shame meets soil therapy. Some unlucky souls weren't dug back out. Sometimes symbolic, turned literal. Historians still debate whether this was common or regional. Was it reserved for thieves? Blasphemers? Or did it double as a form of attempted exorcism? Bury the evil, let the dirt cleanse the spirit? Right now, the ritual is less important than the reality. You're here. The air is thin. And you need to figure out a next move. You shift your left arm again cautiously. The soil moves. It gives. Not much, but enough to sense where the looser patches are. One to the side, one slightly above your shoulder. You pause and listen. No insects. No sound at all. Just your breath and the occasional pulse pounding through your temples. You think about weight. Moist dirt weighs about 100 pounds per cubic foot. If there's 2 feet of it on top of you, that's roughly 200 pounds pressing gently on your chest and face. Not enough to crush you, but enough to keep you respectful. But because the grave is shallow, there's also hope. And here's where things get surprisingly technical. See, survival when buried alive isn't just about brute strength. It's about volume displacement. If you can make a cavity, create a bubble, like a mole, it's possible to displace the dirt above. This is where that medieval training might come in handy. Not the kind you learn at night school, sorry, but the kind learned from centuries of weird superstition, village necessity, and occasionally outright survival. Some old folk tales from the Balkans mention earth sleepers, people who survived burial through a kind of bodily stillness and rhythmic breathing that allowed them to last longer than most. They weren't seen as saints, more like lucky devils. Or witches. Which, as we know, rarely ended well. A few texts even mention charcoal. Yes, charcoal. Buried with the supposedly dead, under the tongue or near the mouth. A weird detail, but the theory goes that charcoal absorbs gas and moisture, keeping air pockets slightly fresher for slightly longer. You don't feel any charcoal. Just the pendant. Still, your brain latches onto that detail, the way a drowning person grabs driftwood. And now your fingers are digging. Carefully. Slowly. The space around your left shoulder seems softer. There's give. Crumbly resistance. You make a fist, press it upward. The dirt resists, then shifts. A cascade. Just a small one. But that's enough. It means you're close. Maybe a foot from the surface. Maybe less. You pause. Breathe again. In. Out. Try not to cough. Your throat is dry. Scratchy. There's a sharp mineral bite in the air now, and a faint sweetness. Grass? Rot? Hard to tell. Then, another surprise. Your fingernails scrape something not dirt. Not wood. Not bone. Fabric. Rough linen, matted and damp. Maybe a sleeve? Your mind jumps straight to panic mode. Is someone buried with you? You freeze. Wait. Feel. But no hand grabs you back. No moan. No twitch. Just cloth. Loose. Crumpled. Like something thrown in after. Maybe they buried you with your own shroud. Or maybe that was someone's way of honoring a tradition. Or maybe, again, they were in a hurry. Whatever the case, you're not alone. Not really. But you're also not done. You shift the dirt again. Pack some beneath your hips for leverage. You need to create upward pressure now. Not fast. Not desperate. Just enough to widen the bubble. Expand the space. Because above you? Just maybe, is air. Or stone. Or a coffin lid. But you'll deal with that when you get there. Your fingers graze something hard. Not a root. Not bone. This feels worked. Too smooth. And then, as your knuckles nudge it further, it flakes. Crumbles slightly. The texture is fibrous, but old, almost brittle. You press again carefully. A seam gives way. Wood. You found wood. Your supposed coffin. And it's not a modern, polished affair with brass handles and velvet lining. No. This is raw. Splintered. Something that was nailed together in haste, with whatever scrap the gravedigger or carpenter had on hand. The planks are thin, less than an inch thick. You shift your palm across one. It's warped with moisture, the grain rising in places like tiny ridges, delicate as veins beneath skin. And there, yes, unmistakably, you find the first set of claw marks. They're shallow. Weak. But real. Not yours. Someone else was here before you. Or this coffin's been reused. A charming little cost-saving measure they never mention in bedtime stories. You see, coffins were expensive in the Middle Ages. Really, really expensive. A well-built one might cost more than the contents of a peasant's entire cottage. So, it wasn't unheard of to rent a coffin for public display and then, well, recycle. Drop the body in naked or swaddled, retrieve the box, and keep it moving. But that's the ideal scenario. In reality, especially during plagues or mass burials, coffins were hastily thrown together, or not used at all. Wood became precious. It wasn't uncommon to rip apart furniture or doors to make them. And sometimes, when no one was watching, they reused coffins completely. Body, wood, and all. And now you're in one. Sort of. Except it's not whole. Your hand slips through a wide gap between two boards, and dirt floods the space around your arm. No lid, you realize? No sides even. Just scraps around you, framing your body like the ruins of a shipwreck. You shift, and something creaks faintly. Wood flexes. Another detail emerges. One that tightens your stomach like a coiled rope. The claw marks run in both directions. Upward and downward. One set's older, deeper, darker, worm-worn. The other, fresher. As if someone very recently tried, like you, to get out. You freeze, eyes wide in the dark, though you see nothing. Your pulse speeds up. There's no room for someone else. So unless you're reading too much into scratches, or unless there was someone else buried with you, you hold your breath. Wait. Listen. Still nothing. Maybe they got out. Maybe they didn't make it. Maybe it was a test run, some medieval ritual, a fake death, trial. A fringe practice, whispered about in obscure court records, where young monks or mystics were buried briefly as a form of enlightenment. Buried to transcend. Buried to awaken. Historians still argue whether these stories were ever real or just church gossip taken too far. But the marks are real. The rot is real. And the smell? You shift slightly, and a new wave of scent rises with you. It's hard to describe, sweet, sharp, earthy. Something between wet leaves and boiled leather. The aroma of time. Of decomposition. And then your hand brushes something else. A nail. Iron. Rusted. Bent at an odd angle. It's sticking out of one of the coffin scraps, and you feel a faint sting as your finger catches on its edge. You jerk back. No blood, yet, but you suck on your knuckle instinctively, even though the taste of metal and soil isn't doing your anxiety any favors. Iron was precious in the Middle Ages, and nails were often salvaged from whatever structures could be torn down. A bent one like this tells a whole story, a coffin hammered together with leftovers, for someone who wasn't expected to stay remembered. You, apparently. Another tap. Your foot brushes something cylindrical. You freeze. Then you wriggle and shift until your toes nudge it again. A hollow, rounded object. Maybe. A wooden peg? No. A femur. Human. Too large to be yours. So, you were buried with someone else's bones. Charming! It wasn't that rare. Grave reuse happened more than most modern minds would care to know. Especially in crowded medieval churchyards. Bones would be exhumed after a few years, stacked in ossuaries or charnel houses to make room for fresh bodies. But sometimes, not all of them were removed. Sometimes they stayed behind. You take another breath. The air tastes marginally clearer. That's a good sign. Maybe the wooden debris above your chest is part of what's kept the weight off. Acting like a scaffold, an accidental frame that kept the dirt from caving completely. That might be your ticket out. But you need to work with it, not against it. Push too hard, and you'll collapse it all. You reach up with both hands now, testing the resistance. One board moves slightly, softened with rot. You push gently. A flake of it breaks off in your grip like a wet cracker. You keep working, breathing slowly, evenly, because every bit of movement chews up air. And while shallow graves offer a better chance, you're still on a countdown. You remember a trick. Maybe something from a strange survival blog or some historical side note tucked into a book. You can breathe into the crook of your arm to filter carbon dioxide if things get tight. Not forever, but it can buy you minutes. So you press your face against your sleeve between movements. Just in case. And with each push, more dirt trickles down, but more lightness comes too. The pressure shifts. The gap widens. You whisper into the dark, not even sure why. Maybe for luck. Maybe in case someone, or something, is listening. The claw marks. The bones. The reused wood. All of it is telling you one thing. You're not the first. But maybe, if you keep moving slow and smart, you'll be the first to make it out. You don't mean to inhale it. It just happens. One shallow breath too fast. Your mouth opens wider than it should. And the next thing you know, a clump of dust and grit slides down your throat like a slow avalanche. You choke, instinctively flailing, but you can't flail in a coffin. Not really. Your knees twitch. Your shoulders tighten. You twist slightly, just enough to make your ribs protest. The coughing starts. And you're instantly panicking. Not because of the choking, but because of what it costs you. Air. You've just wasted some. The grains scratch your throat like sandpaper. Your lungs tighten, confused by the invasion. And for a second, it feels like your chest has forgotten how to breathe at all. But this is when the lesson really begins. You force yourself to stop. Stillness. That's the first rule. You remember reading once, maybe during some late-night Wikipedia spiral, that humans buried in shallow soil can still survive hours if they don't thrash. Oxygen is sparse, but it's there. Your body's only real enemy is panic. So you settle, or try to. Breathe in. Shallow. Through your nose if possible. That filters out the big stuff. Dirt can clog your sinuses, yes, but your lungs? You really don't want soil in there. There's a reason early survival manuals warn about this very problem. Soil inhalation causes lung inflammation, bleeding, and eventually, suffocation, not from lack of air, but from the body reacting to the wrong kind. Which means you've got to train your breathing now, like a monk. Irony not lost on you, given the medieval setting. You start to count. 1, 2, hold. 3, 4, exhale. A trick stolen from freedivers and ancient yogis alike. Yes, seriously. Breathing under pressure is a universal challenge. In fact, medieval scribes once described a secret sect of grave dwellers, men who trained themselves to endure hours beneath the earth, as a form of spiritual discipline. Sounds fake, right? But some obscure 14th century texts mention them. The Hollow Brethren, they who tasted God through dust. Historians still argue whether they were real mystics, premature burial victims turned legend, or just poor translation from Latin gone wrong. Still, the principle checks out. Conserve air. Filter it through cloth if you can. And breathe downward into the belly. Not the chest. Not the shoulders. That burns less oxygen. Keeps the panic at bay. It's working. Slowly. Until the soil shifts again. Another cough triggers it. Just a little. A sprinkle of dirt falls against your cheek, and you instinctively wince. But this time you resist the urge to jerk. Instead, you just wait. Feel. Listen. The dirt settles back into place. Like it was testing you. Fine. Two can play that game. You turn your head a few degrees to the left. The space there is tighter, but cooler. Probably closer to an edge. Or maybe there's some root system nearby. Plants breathing for you, pushing oxygen into the microspaces around your burial chamber. That's not just hopeful thinking either. Roots, especially those of trees, can create literal air pockets underground. In fact, forensic cases have recorded people surviving cave-ins or landslides by wedging their faces into root clusters to find breathable air. It's messy, but effective. You breathe toward that coolness now. Gentle. Measured. Inhale. There's something different about this patch of air. You hold still, testing it. It's fresher? No. Not fresh, exactly. But less used. Less humid. Encouraging. You think of all the things medieval gravediggers never considered. How they didn't know about air pressure or CO2 poisoning. How the average depth of a pauper's grave was barely 3 feet. Enough to keep the body down, but not enough to truly isolate it. And how that's now your one slim advantage. The soil above you isn't packed tight. Some parts have settled. Others are held back by the broken coffin boards, by old roots, by time. And then, you make a tiny shift. Not to dig yet, but to press your fingers against the roof above your face. It crumbles. Loam. Rich. Wet. But loose. You could push through that. Not now. Not yet. You need more air first. A reserve. Enough to last the final effort. So you begin your breathing drill again. Inhale 4. Hold 4. Exhale 4. Again. This time, your mind starts to wonder. It needs to. Because if you let it linger too long on the reality of your situation, that panic will slither back in. So you think about weirder things. Like how, during the 13th century, there were legitimate fears about corpses breathing in graves. They called it the pneuma curse. Stories of plague victims buried too early, heard moaning underground. Some towns drove stakes into corpses' mouths to stop the sound. Modern scholars chalk it up to post-mortem gas shifts. Or, poor diagnostic skills. A person in a coma looked a lot like a corpse to someone without a stethoscope. But the stories persisted. And here you are, breathing under dirt. Living what they feared. You smile. A little dark, sure. But you earned it. The air is still thin. But it's there. And your body is adjusting. You've got this. The final trick? Keeping your brain from using up all your precious oxygen. Thinking burns energy. And fear burns fastest. So you go full monk again. Back to the breath. Downward. Steady. You're not just breathing dirt now. You're mastering it. It begins as a tickle, faint and curious, rushing just behind your ears like a whisper that forgot to finish its sentence. At first, you assume it's your heartbeat again, that echoing drumbeat of survival pounding inside your skull. But then the sound splits, left then right, like it's moving, not pulsing. You hold your breath. Listen closer. There it is again. Muffled. Slurred. Like voices underwater. But you're alone. You know this because you can still feel the contours of the coffin walls. The weight above you is unchanged. The silence is too still. And yet the sound persists, scratching at the edge of your awareness like a wet leaf brushing glass. You want to write it off as imagination. You really do. Except now, it's saying your name. Or something that almost sounds like it. It starts quietly. Then becomes more distinct. The way a dream sometimes sharpens right before you wake up. Except you're not waking up. You're very much awake, sealed inside 6 feet of soil, and the dirt is whispering? Nope. Not the dirt. Your mind. This is where things get tricky. Remember earlier, when we talked about conserving oxygen? Well, here's the price. Low oxygen doesn't just affect your breathing, it starts rewiring your perception. Hallucinations. Auditory distortions. Temporal shifts. Your brain begins to fill in the gaps with noise. Medieval monks used to call this terra susurrens, Latin for the murmuring earth. They believed the ground spoke to those buried within it. Angels or demons, depending on who you asked. Some monks even meditated in freshly dug graves to commune with the void. Fringe behavior? Certainly. But not uncommon. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant as symbolic death rehearsals or genuine mystic attempts to listen to the voices of the beyond. Either way, now you hear them too. You shift again, trying to shake off the sensation, but the soil resists. It presses back with the slow patience of time, reminding you that panic has no place here. So you ground yourself? Figuratively and literally. You count your breaths. You tap your thumb against your chest, slow and rhythmic. 1, 2, 3. Something to remind your brain that you're still in control. That the sounds are tricks of depleted air, not ghostly whispers crawling through the mud. But even as you center yourself, the noises persist. Now, it's not just your name. There's a scraping noise. Slow. Metallic. You freeze. Something is dragging itself across the coffin lid. Faint but deliberate. Like a nail tracing wood. You can almost picture it, an old iron ring, a buckle, or claws? And here it comes again, your name. But this time, it's inside your head. Welcome to the halfway point between survival and surrender. The liminal edge of awareness, where your senses blur and belief starts bending. You've entered what some call coffin cognition, the altered state reported by those few who've somehow made it out of premature burials. A foggy realm where time stretches, logic thins, and the earth hums with stories. One 17th century physician, Dr. Valerius Cordus, claimed to have recorded the testimony of a man who survived burial during a plague outbreak. After 3 hours underground, the survivor reported hearing his deceased wife's voice. She told him where to dig, even though she'd been dead for a year. He clawed in the direction she instructed, and hit an air pocket. Coincidence? Who knows? You lie still, listening. Not because you believe the whispers, but because you don't want to miss something real hidden among them. Your brain is now both ally and enemy. It's feeding you oxygen and illusions at the same time. The soil shifts again. Very slightly. And something cold brushes your fingertips. You recoil, fast, instinctively. But then realize, it's just a stone. Smooth. Damp. Probably rolled free from the wall beside you. Still, it gets the heart thudding. You can't afford these spikes in adrenaline. Every jolt costs air. And air is currency now. So you force yourself to talk. Out loud. Okay, you whisper. Your voice is dry, hoarse. Let's not lose it. Speaking helps. Reminds you there's still you in here. Not just the dirt. And strangely, as soon as you start speaking, the whispers recede. They don't vanish, but they fade, like pulling a curtain between you and them. That's something you file away for later. Sound can override sound. Noise with structure, your own voice, can drown the chaotic murmurings of oxygen-deprived neurons. Smart. Use it. You take inventory again. Air? Still breathable. Soil? Shifting slowly. Mind? Fraying slightly. But you're still here. That's no small feat you remember now, something else strange from the medieval texts. There was this recurring phrase scribbled in the margins of burial records, always in crude Latin. In tenebris audi vocem tuum. In darkness, hear your voice. Maybe it was just poetic nonsense. Maybe it was meant literally. You whisper it now. Once. Then again. And the soil goes still. No more scraping. No more calling your name. Just your breath steady again. Your heartbeat. Your voice. You're not out yet. Not by a long shot. But you've made it through the worst of the whispers. And the next challenge, that's going to involve your hands. Your fingers twitch first. They've been pinned awkwardly at your sides for what feels like centuries. But now, as your mind steadies, you remember, they're not ornaments. They're tools. 10 blunt, dirt-worn claws. And if you're going to get out of here, they're all you've got. You start slowly, flexing one hand, then the other, testing for sensation. There's pain, of course. A kind of quiet, swollen throb that tells you blood hasn't been moving as freely as it should. But there's movement. That's all that matters. The inside of the coffin is just wide enough for shallow motion. Your elbows bend, scrape, protest. You inch your fingers toward the lid. Tap, tap. It's wood. Still. You spread your palms flat. Feel the grain. Feel the cool dampness that's settled above you like the breath of the earth itself. You press. No give. Not surprising, this thing was built to stay closed. But the point isn't to escape yet. The point now is to map. So, you begin your cartography of the coffin. Your hands trace the seams, where lid meets side, side meets foot, where nails were hammered and resin sealed the gaps. You don't have eyes down here, but your fingertips become explorers. Every ridge and crevice tells a story. Some coffins, especially from medieval times, were made with loose-fit lids, designed more for quick burial than for strength. Others, particularly for nobility or plague victims, were reinforced with iron bands. You pray yours is the cheap kind. Then you find it. A knot in the wood, right above your chest. It's imperfect, a weak spot. Tiny, maybe half the size of a coin. But in a structure like this, imperfection is a gift. You begin digging. Not frantically. There's no space for drama down here, but deliberately. One nail at a time, like carving soft cheese with a spoon. The grain splinters beneath your fingernails. You wince, but keep going. Scratch, peel, flake. The sound is faint but real. It's doing something else, too. It's calming. You're making noise now. Intentional noise. It drowns out any whispering nonsense still lingering in the back of your head. Funny how the act of doing fights the panic of being. Hands, as it turns out, are more than tools. They're reassurance. There's a legend from 13th century Europe about a gravedigger named Elias, who swore he saw fingers moving beneath fresh soil. He dug. Found a child barely breathing, who'd been buried by accident after collapsing in the fields. The boy lived. And when he was old enough, he carved wooden rings with Elias's name etched inside, one for every grave saved. No one knows how many rings there were in the end. Historians still argue whether Elias was real or just a parable about mercy. Either way, the image stays with you, a finger pushing through earth, seen by someone with just enough doubt to dig again. You scratch harder. Tiny splinters wedge under your nails. You don't care. Pain means you're alive. And sensation means control. Eventually, a flake of wood pops loose. You feel it tumble down your chest. Progress. You pause to breathe, lips close to the knothole now. It's barely a crack, but you imagine, just maybe, the tiniest bit of fresh air seeping through. Probably not enough to make a difference, but maybe. Maybe enough to buy minutes. Every second counts. This is the part they never mention in stories. The slow, maddening work of clawing out. It's not heroic. It's not cinematic. It's just you in the box. A tug-of-war between your will and the coffin's silence. You remember an old tale, Norman England, maybe, about grave robbers who accidentally unearthed a man mid-prayer. His hands were folded, and the look on his face was peaceful. They reburied him, too spooked to continue. What they didn't know. His fingers were raw. Fingernails gone. He'd been praying with hands that never stopped digging. You wonder if that was mercy. Or guilt. You pause again. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because something shifts. Above you. Not loud. But real. A faint hiss. A breath? A crack? No. Just the wood settling. It has to be. You keep digging. The knothole is wider now. Enough for a fingertip. You push one in, feel soil. Of course. Dirt packed right against the lid. But it's dry. That's good. Wet soil compacts like clay, hard as stone. Dry soil shifts. Dry soil is your friend. You wiggle the finger. Test the resistance. It yields, just slightly. You blink hard in the dark. Not that it matters. But your brain still associates blinking with seeing. Still reaching for sensory clarity. The urge to shout claws at your throat. To cry for help. But you don't. Sound doesn't travel far underground. Especially not upward. Shouting wastes breath. Your job isn't to call. It's to climb. Inch by miserable inch. So you return to your hands. Push both into the knothole now. Widen it. Scratch more wood. Soil tumbles in. You don't panic. Not this time. You want the soil. Need it. Because if enough comes in, if you can loosen it, shift it, pack it differently, then you can make space. You dig. Your hands numb. Raw. But purposeful. Because now you're making a hole. It's not much. It's laughably small. But it's a beginning. And from beginnings come a sense. Or at least, that's what you hope. The dirt doesn't fall all at once. It starts slow, like powdered sugar sifted from some giant, invisible sieve. Granule by granule, it trickles through the jagged hole you've carved in the lid. Cold, dry flecks drift across your cheeks, and the scent hits, earthy, metallic, ancient. You brace yourself. Because once the earth starts moving, you're no longer just entombed. You're below something in motion. And that changes the rules. It's easy to forget, but soil is alive. Not with worms or roots, though sure, those too, but with weight and temperament. A grave, even a shallow one, holds hundreds of pounds of soil above your chest. And the moment you poke a hole in your lid, you've disrupted the delicate pressure balance that keeps it suspended. Congratulations. You've just made yourself a vertical landslide. You raise your elbows, letting your forearms support the pressure as the dirt flows in. Not fast, but insistent. You try to angle your body, position your shoulders into a wedge. Make space. Create angles. That's what counts now. Because here's the thing about soil, it doesn't act like water. It clumps. When the weight above hits air pockets, it binds and holds. So as it presses down through the coffin's opening, it forms barriers. Ledges. You can use those. With luck, and a lot of squirming, you can crawl up them. Like climbing out of wet cement. In the 14th century, grave design wasn't standardized. Graves were often dug by hand, depths varying wildly depending on the season, the gravedigger, and whether or not someone bribed to get buried deeper, away from thieves. Some graves were less than 4 feet deep. Others dropped close to 7. You pray yours is shallow. The way the dirt feels? Loose, grainy, like decomposed leaves and sand. That's good. Worse would be clay. Clay kills. It traps. It seals. It doesn't let air pass. And it never gives back what it takes. Historians still argue whether plague-era burial pits were intentionally shallow to speed up mass interments, or simply because of exhaustion and volume. Either way, there are recorded cases of people crawling out. Surviving. Covered in soil, coughing, reborn like monsters from myth. One account from Germany in 1352 tells of a young woman, Anna, who clawed her way from a charnel pit during a thunderstorm. She arrived at the village chapel naked, caked in mud, and screaming of demons underground. Most called her mad. A few called her chosen. No one asked what it felt like under there. You're learning that firsthand. The soil's now to your shoulders. It's not heavy yet, but you feel the shift. A quiet compacting. Like the grave is hugging you tighter. So you move. Slowly. Methodically. Push with your feet. Buck your hips. Let your shoulders grind into the coffin's side wall, using every ounce of resistance to wiggle upward. Your hands work the growing hole. It's wide now, 5, maybe 6 inches. Enough for both arms. You press them through. Soil collapses around your biceps, tight and cold. But still dry. You twist your wrists. Feel for roots, stones, anything sturdy. And you find one. Not a big one, but enough. It might be a rock, or maybe an old nail from a neighboring grave's collapsed marker. Whatever it is, it doesn't move. You grip it and pull. Your chest lifts half an inch. The coffin creaks below. You freeze. That sound, it's not good. The lid may be weakening, or worse, the box could be shifting. When soil pours into voids, it can tilt objects, coffins included. You lie still for a beat, heart pounding, throat thick. Then you move again, gently. One knee tucks up. You plant your foot against the inner wall and press, turning your hips. Now your body's angled, diagonal across the box. Less coffin occupant, more cork trying to pop from a bottle. Your hands scrape more soil aside. Some of it flows into the box. Some packs tightly around your ribs. Your breath shortens. Pressure builds. You pause again. Think of a trick. Not magic, but medieval. Old burial guides sometimes included weird little tips for survival, though no one knew if they were serious. One suggestion: if ever buried, try eating the dirt in front of you to make space. Another: keep your mouth closed tightly when it flows in, or it will fill your lungs before you can scream. Good advice. Kind of. You clench your teeth. Shift your shoulders. And suddenly, your left hand breaks into something new. It's air. Just a pocket. But you feel it. Cool. Empty. Sacred. You punch at it, widen it, scramble your fingers against the soft walls of the soil chamber. It collapses instantly, but not before you've pulled yourself half out of the box. Yes, your legs are still stuck. But your torso, your arms, your face, they're in soil now, not wood. It's an upgrade. You use your elbows like ice picks. Dig. Wedge. Push. Above you, the earth groans soft, warning. Too much movement, and it could cave entirely. But that might be okay. If it falls right, the collapse could bring you with it. Like a wave pulling you upward. You lean into the motion. And down comes the dirt. You squeeze your eyes shut. Let it cover your head, your neck. You don't panic. You just bite your lips shut and move forward. Through it. With it. Like a mole in the dark. Because you're not beneath the earth anymore. You're in it. And that means one thing: you're not a corpse. You're a tunnel. You breathe it in before you realize it. Earth, sweat, something sharp like rusted iron. The air and soil isn't nothing. It has layers. It has history. It has teeth. At first, it's the loam that hits, clean, in a strange way. Sweet almost. The kind of smell you might love after rain, walking through woods. Rich, damp living. But then, it changes. The deeper you go, the older it smells. Less forest, and more forgotten root cellar. The oxygen is thin. There's a tightness now behind your eyes, like they've been vacuum sealed. Your nose flares, hunting for anything clean. But all you get is the past. There's something sharp in it. Like rust. Or old blood. It might be both. You try not to think about what, or who, has rotted near here. In plague times, coffins weren't always individual. Sometimes they stacked them, laid body upon body in pits. If your grave was dug on a reused plot, and odds are good it was, you're probably not the only thing buried here. And it smells like it. You reach again. Your fingers plunge forward, and for a moment they hit something soft. Springy. Cloth? You freeze. Not yours. The fabric's moist, and when your fingernail catches on it, a damp pop echoes in the hollows of your brain. You back off. Quick. No need to meet whoever was here before. Historians still argue whether medieval graveyards ever had designated layering systems, or if it was all just guesswork by overwhelmed clergy. Some claim bones were recycled, after a time, stored in ossuaries to make room for more. Others insist grave markers were moved just to avoid disturbing relatives. You're hoping for the recycling theory. Less chance of, well, flesh. The scent sharpens as you climb higher. Rot, yes, but human rot. You know it instinctively. The way the air changes when a dead thing lingers nearby. Even filtered through dirt, it has presence. A taste. Like burnt copper and wet leaves. It coats the back of your throat. You try to swallow. Can't. Instead, you breathe through your mouth, even though every survival tip you've ever read says don't. Mouth breathing pulls in dust. Spores. Microbes. But at this point, your nose is half soil anyway, so what choice do you have? And there's something else too. A sweetness. Cloying. Wrong. Some buried things leak sugar. Not literal sugar, but the sugary stink of fermentation. It's the scent of soft tissues collapsing, of gas and bacteria, and you stop the thought there. Don't follow that path. Instead, you remember something odd. Old plague journals, translated in the 1800s, talk about burial airs. Invisible, toxic clouds released when graves were opened. People believed they caused illness. Some wore garlic in their collars or held posies under their noses to block it. That rhyme, ring around the rosy, that's not just folklore. It's a symptom list disguised as a lullaby. Pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. Yeah, you know how it ends. But tonight there are no posies. Just dirt. And decay. And your own slow, steady crawl through the dark. You take shallow breaths. Not because you're scared, though, let's be honest, you are, but because oxygen is dwindling. Less air in this cavity. More carbon dioxide with every exhale. You need to get higher. Soon. And as if to answer your wish, your elbow hits something hard. A rock? No. It scrapes differently. You twist your wrist, brush soil away. Wood. Not from your coffin, you're already half out of that. This is a beam. A crossbar? Maybe from an old crypt frame or burial support structure. It's not rotted through. You grab it. Anchor yourself. Then push your body upward with slow, piston-like movements. Inch by inch. Your skin drags against dirt. It fills your ears, trickles down your shirt collar, finds every crease of your body. You're not just surrounded by earth now. You're part of it. And it's watching. No, not in the haunted sense. In the sensation sense. The soil molds to your ribs. It tightens at your thighs. The temperature drops as you climb, which should be encouraging. Cooler air usually means you're closer to the surface. But it also burns in its own way. Like frostbite made of mud. You keep your jaw clenched. Teeth vibrating with tension. There's a bitter tang in your saliva. You've bitten your tongue. You didn't notice. But now it tastes like pennies. More iron. More blood. It mixes with the scent of the earth and swirls in your mouth until it feels like you're drinking history. Grave dust and regret. Here's a fun, useless fact. In medieval France, the scent of the dead was sometimes called l'air des ombres. The air of shadows. Poets used it. Clergy feared it. It was blamed for fainting, madness, even possession. You feel all of that now. And none of it. Mostly you feel tired. But not ready to stop. Because just a few feet more and the scent will change again. The soil will thin. The air will sweeten. And then, you hope, the surface will come. Until then you crawl. Breath shallow. Joints aching. Mind flickering between every smell it can identify and the thousand you hope not to. And then, like a miracle, like a curse, the scent changes. Grass. Distant. But real. Something green. Alive. You pause, nose against the soil wall. Inhale again. Yes. There's a whisper of plant life above you. The soil's getting looser. Flecks of dried root graze your cheeks. You can almost hear worms nearby, twisting. Closer now. Closer. But every scent carries a warning. The grave isn't letting go. It's inviting you. Like a trap made of memory. And you're still crawling toward it. You feel it first as a tickle, something delicate brushing the underside of your wrist. You freeze. Stillness is your only defense here. The dirt presses in on all sides, but this thing is moving. It wriggles again. A worm. You let out the smallest breath of relief. That's manageable. That's not teeth. But then comes the second one. A heavier, cooler slither curling across your clavicle like a necklace you never asked for. You wince, slowly turning your neck as if that could somehow dislodge it without upsetting the soil. Another worm? You try not to think about the old tales, those medieval ones whispered to scare apprentices. That the dead don't rot alone. That the grave gives them company. Not spirits, creatures. Worms, sure. But also other things. Rats. Snakes. Folk once swore that demons took the shapes of burrows. That the devil himself used mole tunnels to spy on souls not yet fully gone. And though you know, scientifically, that's nonsense, your buried brain doesn't care. It fills the shadows with faces anyway. Roots now join the party. They creep in from the sides, thin tendrils brushing past your earlobes, your temples, your knuckles. They aren't aggressive, just present. Living. They move without moving, stretching ever so slowly through the loam. Funny thing, medieval monks used to believe roots sought out the dead. That they fed on sin, drawing strength from whatever lingered in the body after breath had left. A macabre kind of gardening. And you're the compost now. You shift, trying to move upward. But something gives way beneath your knee with a wet sigh. The earth opens. Not much, but enough to drop your weight into a narrow side pocket. And there it is. Another coffin. Or what's left of one. With soft like cake, collapsing at your touch. And something inside. Solid. Wrapped. Cloth again. Skin-shaped. You scramble, or as close to scrambling as one can manage when one is basically a meat crayon in a soiled tube. Your boot catches a rib, someone else's, and it snaps like chalk. You can't apologize. They're not listening. But the pressure spikes in your chest, part guilt, part pure, unfiltered human panic. Because now you know you're not alone. You never were. You breathe through clenched teeth, lips pressed against dirt. The air is staler here, deader. You taste mildew, ancient sweat, even something chemical. Formaldehyde? Unlikely. Too old. But something similar. Historians still argue whether poor graveyards in medieval Europe truly practiced mass burials in common graves, or if such arrangements were more a result of plague panic and wartime expedients. Either way, records show bones were often found jumbled decades later. No one was cataloging anything. And now, lucky you, you're rediscovering it all by feel. Your hand brushes another hand. Too small. Child. You jerk back like it burned you. It didn't, but somehow that makes it worse. This is the moment where your rational mind should kick in. Reassure you that you're just crossing old, already buried remains. But no, it's your lizard brain who takes the wheel now. The one that screams, get out. Get up. Get away. You surge upward, using your arms now more than your legs, clawing through loose, wet soil. You don't even care that you're gouging your fingertips raw. Dirt gets under your nails, into your cuts. It burns, but you keep going. Something squeals in the dirt beside you. Not loud, not human. A rodent? It retreats fast, and you thank whatever tiny mercy let it go the other way. You'd lose your mind if something bit you down here. Medieval texts mention corpse rats, vermin that lived exclusively in graveyards, feasting on unguarded remains. Some claimed they grew hairless, blind, bloated on the dead. People believed they carried curses instead of fleas. One bishop even banned graveyard burials near water wells, blaming ghost rats for poisoned springs. You try to ignore the way something brushes your ankle. You keep climbing. Your shoulders jam, then slip free. The walls feel narrower now, which doesn't make sense. You're ascending, aren't you? Unless the soil's shifting. Or something's moving. You don't dwell. You can't. Every second down here is a balance between focus and fragility. So you fixate on the roots. Follow them. They always grow toward water, toward light, toward air. That's your compass now. They thicken as you climb, first like threads, then cords, then real, tangled things. Tree roots. The kinds that crack pavement and swallow fences. If you're under a tree, that's promising. Trees mean shallower soil. You reach one root the width of your forearm and wrap your fingers around it. It holds. Just barely. You pull yourself up, scraping your ribs on the way. And finally, with a pressure pop in your ears, you taste it. Fresh air. Not much. Just a whisper. But it's cooler. Cleaner. No longer ancient. You're close. So you pause. Just long enough to gather yourself. Because the worst may be over. Or it's waiting just above. Your fingers twitch, brushing against something that feels different. Not dirt, not wood, not root. Air. Cool, dry, unmoving. You suck in a breath, and it doesn't taste like mud anymore. It tastes like possibility. You're near the surface. But here's the thing about hope. It's a slippery little liar. Because just as you're lifting your hand toward what you think is sky, your knuckles knock hard against something unexpected. Something solid. Stone. A slab. Not a headstone, no. This is horizontal. Flat. Wide. A lid. You're not in the open air yet. You're under a crypt. A shallow one, maybe. A family tomb or a churchyard vault. The kind wealthy medieval types preferred because they didn't want to mix with the common grave. Status, even in death. But you're under it. Not in it. Trapped between two worlds, the buried and the blessed. And suddenly that small pocket of breathable air seems like a joke. A tease. You push at the stone. It doesn't budge. Not even a whisper of movement. But the soil around it is looser. You dig to the side, find the edge. Another push. This time it shifts, just a little, but enough to let in more air. Enough to let in something else, too. A smell. Rot. Old, stale, sweet, sick rot. You've smelled death before, but this is different. This is preserved. Tombs like these were often sealed tight, and that meant anything inside, well, it didn't decompose cleanly. In some cases, they mummified. Skin like parchment. Eyes like marbles. Entire family lines stacked in dusty shelves like books. You push again, and this time the slab gives way with a grinding shudder. A crack opens just wide enough for your hand to slip through. And there it is. Stone floor. Cold. Flat. Unforgiving. But above it, open air. Well, not open. A chamber. Dark, but not black. You see the outline of an arched roof, faint light leaking through a metal grate far above. You're in a tomb. You pull yourself up, limbs trembling from the climb. Your chest rises and falls like a bellows, greedy for air that isn't filled with worms and whispers. You lie flat for a moment on the stone, staring up at the curved ceiling. Welcome to the middle tier of medieval real estate. Wealthy folks, nobles, high clergy, they didn't bury underground like peasants. No, they built up. Crypts beneath chapels. Catacombs under abbeys. Some even had their own private mausoleums with coats of arms carved above the entrance. It wasn't just about death, it was about display. But you're not here for a tour. You need out. And the grate above, maybe 10, 12 feet up, is your only ticket. You rise, legs shaky, shoes scraping on centuries of dust and bone fragments. Something crumbles under your heel. You don't look too closely. The tomb is quiet, save for a slow drip somewhere in the corner. And then a noise. Faint. Metal shifting. Not the grate. Something else. You turn slowly, and your eyes adjust just enough to see it. A figure. Sitting upright in a stone alcove. Don't panic. It's a statue. You think. Hope. The rich love to be memorialized in stone. Effigies. Life-sized. Lying in peace, hands in prayer. Some were startlingly lifelike. Others barely human. This one seated. Hooded. Face down. No nameplate. You stare a second too long. Its hand is pointing. You don't remember that when you came in. You back away. Slowly. Toward the center of the chamber. Toward the shaft of light above. The pointing continues. Or maybe your mind is filling in blanks it shouldn't. Historians still argue whether medieval crypts were ever intentionally designed to frighten. Some say the iconography, the skulls, the hourglasses, the angels blowing trumpets, were purely symbolic. Others argue they were cautionary, a literal memento mori, meant to remind you that death watches everything. Well, you've been watched. Time to climb. You look around and spot what you hope is your salvation, a carved stone shelf set into the wall. Decoration? Or a step? Doesn't matter. You take it. Then another. Slowly, awkwardly you rise. Your fingers wrap around the iron bars of the grate. Cool. Rusted. Brittle, maybe. You rattle it gently. It creaks, but doesn't lift. Locked. Of course it is. But you're not the only thing down here that wants out. Something skitters behind you. You whip your head around, heart thundering. The statue hasn't moved. Not that you can see. You reach for your belt. Not much there, just a stone you grabbed earlier. You wedge it under the edge of the grate, press your weight against it. Metal groans. The hinge cracks. A little more. Almost. Something brushes your ankle. Nope. You shove harder. The grate snaps upward, and daylight, Real daylight spills in like a miracle. You scramble through, elbows bleeding, knees bruised. You don't even care. Grass under your palms, wind on your neck. Freedom. But the second you look back down into the crypt, you see it. The statue's hand is no longer pointing. It's open, reaching. You crawl backward until the stone edge is out of sight, breath catching in your throat. Don't go back. You're out now. But the world above isn't exactly a welcome parade. The cemetery's abandoned. No path. No signage. Just trees, moss, and silence. You take one cautious step away from the crypt. Then another. The soft grass beneath your feet is a far cry from the choking weight of the dirt below, but there's no celebration in your breath. Only survival, frayed and temporary. You're out. But you're not free. Because now the silence is too thick. The kind that presses into your ears, makes your own heartbeat sound loud. You scan the crooked tombstones, half sunk and weather chewed. No birds. No insects. No breeze. Just the cemetery caught in a breath it hasn't released in centuries. And here's the unsettling truth. Medieval burial grounds weren't always just about burying people. They were built with intention, alignment with ley lines, sacred geometry, proximity to relics. This wasn't just logistics. This was ritual. And you, quite possibly, have walked into one that never wanted to be disturbed. The trees at the edge of the cemetery are too straight, too still. They form a wall rather than a forest. When you move toward them, you feel like a trespasser. A child creeping through a museum after hours. But you can't stay here. Not when something in the air still smells faintly of stone and rot. You step beyond the last grave and into the brush. The path, if there ever was one, has vanished. Vines curl upward like fingers. A root catches your foot, but you recover quickly. Your nerves are too sharp now to fall. You try to orient yourself, scanning the sun. But it's too low in the sky, a bleached disk behind gray clouds. Morning? Evening? Time's slippery when you've been underground. As you walk, you catch glimpses of stone. Not headstones this time, walls. Half-buried, moss-covered structures that once might have been cottages. Maybe even an outpost. This was once a village. One of the countless that dot medieval maps as black dots and no names. Abandoned villages weren't rare in the Middle Ages. Some were emptied by plague. Others by famine. A few, mysteriously, just faded. Historians still argue whether these desertions were purely economic, or if something darker turned entire populations to silence. Your boot crunches glass. You look down and see the green shard of a broken vial. Then more, scattered like breadcrumbs. Tiny, delicate containers. Some are still sealed with wax. Apothecary stock. You're walking through what was once a healer's garden. A place where brews were made. Salves, tonics, poisons. You pass a circle of stones, barely waist high. A well. But the rope and bucket are gone, and the stones are claw-marked. Deep scratches, like someone, or something, tried to climb out. You don't linger. Deeper into the woods, the sky grows darker. Not from time, but from canopy. Trees close above like cathedral arches. You can almost imagine stained glass and organ music. You smile, finally, a brief absurd thought amid the tension. And then you hear it. A voice. No language, just tone. Like someone humming through their teeth. Low. Off-key. You freeze. The sound comes again, closer. A dry, broken rhythm. And just like that, the wind returns. Not around you, but in front. Branches rustle ahead, parting unnaturally. Like something is making room for what's approaching. You duck low, crawling into a patch of brush. The vines tear at your sleeves, but you stay still. Stay quiet. Through the gaps you see a figure. Tall. Thin. Inhumanly so. Its limbs move like branches caught in a breeze. No face. Just cloth. Or skin. Or both. It drifts past where you stood seconds before. It doesn't look down. But it listens. That sound, the humming, it's coming from it. Your breath holds so long your vision dances. You count heartbeats. 15. 20. Then silence. You wait longer. Just in case. And then you move. Cautiously. Backward at first. One hand behind, testing each step. Then sideways, circling the figure's path. You don't run. Not yet. You remember what you learned below, how panic wastes breath. And out here, even if you're not buried, air can still be precious. You pass an archway, stone, broken, overtaken by ivy. And beyond it, a path. A real one. Worn but clear. Crushed leaves and dry soil. The kind that feet have shaped over time. And you're not picky about your exits anymore. You follow it. As you walk, the forest lightens. The trees thin. The hum is gone. You find what looks like a stone marker, half buried in the path. A name you can't pronounce. Below it, a date scratched hastily. 1349, the year the Black Death hit hardest. This whole area may have been cordoned off. Not just by fear, but by superstition. In some parts of Europe, entire plague villages were left sealed. Buildings torched. Doors bricked. Survivors, if there were any, driven out or executed. And sometimes, stories survived even when maps didn't. Legends of the still living, dead. Not zombies. Not vampires. But cursed souls buried improperly. Those who never received last rites, or were interred outside hallowed ground. Believed to haunt the spaces between worlds. You just walked out of one. And something else walked with you. You don't look back. The path bends. Upward now. A slope, gentle but steady. With each step, the air smells cleaner. More real. Like moss and pine and something bright. You climb faster. A bird calls in the distance. The first sign of life you've heard in hours. At the top of the hill, the trees part, and you see it. A road. Paved. Cracked, but unmistakably modern. A power line runs alongside. Civilization. You don't run toward it. You stagger. Limbs heavy with days of tension. You don't care who finds you now, farmer, police, curious hiker. You just want someone to speak your name. But as you step onto the asphalt, something stops you. The humming. Faint. From the trees behind. Just a single note. And then silence. You don't turn around. Not because you aren't curious. But because survival, at this point, depends on not indulging curiosity. That humming could mean anything, or nothing, but whatever made it doesn't need your eye contact to follow. You take one cautious step onto the road, listening for gravel crunch, for tires, for anything human. But it's quiet. And something in your gut tells you the forest isn't done with you yet. So you follow the road. It winds gently, hemmed in by stone walls crumbled with age. Not modern fencing, no streetlights. No signage. The kind of path that only leads back to the past. And as you walk, you start noticing them, symbols etched into the stones. Faint, worn by rain and time, but unmistakably intentional. Crosses with split bases. Spirals. A crude image of a man with a beak for a nose. It hits you slowly. This road wasn't made for travelers. It was made to contain something. Centuries ago, plague-ridden zones were marked with such signs. Symbols to warn outsiders away. And to remind locals, you don't come back once you've been marked. But then the wall breaks. Ahead, where the stones collapse into tangled roots, you see a doorway. Yes, a doorway. Just a frame, ancient wood and iron hinges, but standing alone. No building attached. You stop. And something compels you forward. You push the door open. It doesn't resist. On the other side is no room, no threshold. Just forest again. But denser. Colder. The trees hang low, cloaked in moss, their bark cracked like skin. And right at the center, a structure. Stone. Squat. Covered in vines. More like a bunker than a home. You approach it slowly. The entrance is narrow. You have to duck. Inside it's dark, but your eyes adjust faster than they should. Moonlight bleeds through the cracks in the walls, lighting up shelves lined with bottles, jars, brittle scrolls. A monastery cell. Or what remains of one. But this wasn't just a monk's living space. You can feel it. This was a lab. In the Middle Ages, many monks dabbled in proto-science, alchemy, herbalism, astrology. But some went further. In secret. Hidden from both church and crown. And a few chased something they called transcendent breath. A way to slow death. To defeat rot. You trace your fingers along a table worn by centuries. Scratches. Stains. A cracked leather-bound volume lies open, its pages brittle but legible. Latin. You catch fragments. Experientia ultima, Spiritum inter terram, respiratio sine vita. The final experiment. Breathe beneath the earth. Life without life. You sit. And let the silence settle. That monk, whoever he was, tried to solve the one thing that plagued every man of his time: how to avoid the worms. Not through heaven. Not through sainthood. But through endurance. You scanned the pages. It wasn't just theory. He practiced. Not on others, on himself. He built this cell for isolation, to train the body to survive without sunlight, with only shallow breaths. He fasted. Deprived. Slowly acclimated. A medieval version of biohacking. Of hypoxic tolerance. And the final entry is just one sentence. Tonight, I enter the soil. There's no record after that. No report of his return. No confirmation of death. But you're beginning to suspect he may not have died properly. The forest, the cemetery, that humming presence, maybe they're not echoes of the plague or legends spun from fear. Maybe they're experiments gone too well. And maybe, just maybe, your escape didn't evade that monk's last experiment. Maybe it completed it. A sudden breeze moves through the cell. But no windows are open. The bottles on the shelves rattle. One falls and shatters. You don't jump. Because your eyes are fixed on the floor now. There's a hatch. Small. Wooden. Iron reinforced. You kneel and touch the edges. Cold. The boards are newer than the rest of the cell. Someone added this later. You lift it. The stench hits you first. Like mildew and breath. The passage is narrow. Sloped. And dug straight into the earth. You almost laugh. Because of course there's another tunnel. But then something catches your eye. On the underside of the hatch, burned into the wood, is a message: respire. Non dormias? Breathe. Do not sleep. It's both instruction and warning. And somewhere deep down, you understand, this monk's journey didn't end in that grave. It moved. Survived. Perhaps, evolved. Historians still argue whether certain burial experiments were real or myth. Tales of monks who achieved suspended animation, or created half-deads, who wandered the woods, humming softly, never needing air or food again. Scholars debate their ethics. If such monks existed, were they scientists, or monsters? But for you, there's no time to ponder. You close the hatch, sealing the breathless dark beneath. You rise and leave the cell without looking back. Outside, the trees seem taller, sharper, but the road is still there, waiting. You step back onto the path, and the moment you do, you feel the hum again. This time, inside your chest. It matches your heartbeat. Then slows. Then settles. You inhale deeply. But it feels unnecessary. Like your lungs are remembering something they didn't want to know. And as the wind picks up and the trees lean towards you like listeners, you do the only thing you can. You walk. Away from the cell. Back toward the world. Hoping the world still remembers you. The wind doesn't follow you. Not exactly. But the air carries something now, something heavier than sound, lighter than breath. You move with it like a leaf drifting downstream, knowing the current but not the source. The forest thins. But before the trees fully relent, you stumble across what looks like another remnant of the past, a collapsed library. Or at least that's what it must have been once. Stone arches lie half swallowed by roots, and shelves, long since warped, tilt drunkenly in the undergrowth. Books are everywhere. Decayed. Torn. Scattered like leaves from a windstorm that only touched this clearing. You hesitate before kneeling beside one that's mostly intact. Its cover is dark, almost black, but under the moonlight, it gleams with a dull red pattern, vines woven into a circle. You open it. No title. Just a line, scrawled by hand at the top of the first page. Do not read aloud. You pause. Because that's never not a red flag. But the rest of the page draws you in anyway. It details breathing rites. Specific ones? Burial preparation rituals from across medieval Europe. Forgotten chants, slow rhythms, sequences of inhalation and silence. You read about monks who practiced these rites before interring themselves for days, even weeks. A test. A trial. An obsession. Some buried themselves in shallow earth to commune with what they believed were premortal memories. Others claimed to emerge with voices not their own. And one sect, referenced only as Ordo Quiet Spiritus, Order of the Quiet Spirit, had perfected a method they called unbreathing. a way to silence the body without silencing the mind. Modern historians argue whether such groups ever existed. Their references are few, fragmented, and often dismissed as metaphors or allegories. But the details here, they're too exact. The diagrams, the cadences, even the chemical recipes for herbal slows and lung relaxants, they read more like field notes than fantasy. You flip forward. More symbols. A passage that seems to be copied from an older, cruder text. And at the bottom of one yellowed page, a note scratched hastily into the margin: if you find this, do not try it alone. Too late for that. Because as your fingers trace the final illustration, an anatomical sketch of lungs drawn like they're flowering, you notice something alarming. Your breathing has already changed. It's shallow, but not panicked. Calm. Automatic. Like your body has decided it remembers the right all on its own. You drop the book. Your hand trembles. Not from fear, but from clarity. You remember the hum. The hatch. The etched warning: breathe. Do not sleep. You recall the monk's final sentence: tonight, I entered the soil. You remember the feeling as you stepped out of that tunnel and into the road, like your body had crossed not just distance, but discipline. Initiation. You're not doing the right. You've been done. You look back at the book, now damp from moss and dew, and realize something important. It wasn't written as instruction. It was written as a confession. A record from someone who had tried the rites, and regretted them. Or maybe failed them. You flip one last page and see a seal stamped at the bottom: wax, long dried and cracked, pressed with the symbol of a skull within a circle of roots. A footnote says simply, only those who never sleep may truly unbreathe. You don't know what that means. But you don't like how your eyelids suddenly feel too light. As though sleep is not just unnecessary, but forbidden. You rise. And with some reluctance, take the book with you. Not to use it. To keep it from being found. The forest finally begins to recede. Houses return, distant lights glowing dimly behind frosted windows. But they feel far away, like watching another life from the bottom of a well. Your pace slows. Because there's someone ahead. Standing in the road. A man, or rather, something wearing the shape of a man. He doesn't move. Just stands. Silent. Still. The air hums again. That same soft, reverberating sound from the woods. From beneath the hatch. From inside your chest. He tilts his head. And then does something you weren't prepared for. He inhales. Deeply. Audibly. It's the same rhythm you read in the book. And you realize, you're mirroring it without meaning to. Your breaths align with his. And your vision wavers. There's no aggression. No threat. But there is intent. This is a test. The rite is not just a ritual, it's a language. And this thing, this being, it's asking if you speak it. You take one final breath in the pattern. And hold. He watches you. Then nods. Once. And vanishes. Just gone. You exhale sharply, gasping like someone who's been underwater too long. And when you breathe again, the forest is gone behind you. Only open fields remain, dotted with frost and whispering reeds. You feel lighter, but not freer. Because that moment felt less like passing a trial, and more like being accepted into something you didn't ask for. The quiet spirit. The rite. The long breath beneath the earth. One fringe theory among monastic scholars suggests the Ordo Quiet Spiritus still exists, operating not as a cult, but as a kind of meditative sleeper cell. Individuals trained to outlast trauma, deprivation, even death. Hidden across the world. Waiting. Waiting for what? No one agrees. Some say they protect knowledge. Others believe they protect something else, something that must never wake. You cross the final gate back into the village. Not a single dog barks. Not a window stirs. Everything is still. And you, walking slowly, feel a strange kinship with the silence. Like it's breathing with you. Or maybe, through you. You move like someone who's forgotten they ever moved differently. Your steps have rhythm now. Not marching, not quite gliding, but measured. Like every breath you take belongs to something older than lungs. Something that stretches back through soil and stone and ink-dark tunnels no one speaks of anymore. The village ahead is lit, but only barely. Amber glows behind curtains, soft light leaking through thin slats, creating silhouettes of quiet lives. A dog barks once, then stops, as if remembering you're not to be noticed. You walk unnoticed anyway, And that's what's strange, isn't it? Because a part of you, some modern, tired, skeptical slice, still wants to believe this is just sleepwalking. A strange forest dream. Maybe something triggered by a podcast, a documentary, a long YouTube spiral of conspiracy and caffeine. But the ache in your lungs? That's real. The heartbeat so slow it feels like silence? Also real. And the fact that you haven't eaten, or slept, or even yawned in what must be hours, days? That's not normal. It's a discipline. And somehow you've been inducted. Not by choice, perhaps. But still. It's with this quiet weight in your bones that you find the little chapel. Not marked. Not grand. Just there. A squat, moss-covered building with narrow windows and a door that opens as though it's been expecting you. Inside, candles burn. Always a few. Always low. And in the back corner sits a man. Not the one from the road. This one is older. Robes the color of ash. A beard trimmed with care. He doesn't look surprised. Just tired. You don't speak. You just breathe. So does he. It's enough. He gestures toward a bench. You sit. And in that long silence, the past comes flooding forward. The Ordo Quiet Spiritus was never a myth, not really. The order survived in pockets, in forgotten monasteries, sealed libraries, even military outposts during wartime. Their breathing techniques were once sought by warriors hoping to enter battle calm, unshaken, able to control adrenaline the way others control fire. Some say elite snipers, particularly those trained to wait days without movement, unconsciously use parts of the rite. They don't know its name. But the breath, the stillness, the detachment, it echoes through them. Others whisper that certain monks in Eastern Europe, as recently as the 1970s, continued the stone vigil, a ritual in which the practitioner would lie in a stone coffin for 3 days beneath the earth, entering a conscious stasis. Science dismissed it as performance. Until one monk, upon exhumation, demonstrated not just awareness, but described the dreams of others buried beside him. Modern scholarship can't quite prove it, but fringe academics dig. Quietly. Persistently. Because it's not just religious types or historians who find this compelling. No. Recently, evidence surfaced that intelligence agencies experimented with similar breathing regimens during Cold War Black Ops programs. Techniques to slow metabolism, to induce a state of semi-hibernation in hostile environments. Some claim it was purely chemical. Others suggest it was ritualistic. The name, Project Stillwater, appears in a few declassified documents. The program was shut down. Or so they say. The man beside you, he finally speaks. Just one line. You didn't resist the breath. You nod. He continues. You walk the right. It walks you now. His words feel both comforting and ominous, like a lullaby with a hidden threat. He reaches into his robes and produces a stone. Flat. Smooth. Etched with the same symbol from the book, a skull within roots. He places it in your hand. Not a gift. A key. There are others, he says. Quiet ones. All over the world. Breathing the same breath. Waiting in chapels, in bunkers, in rooms behind rooms. Waiting for the return. The return of what, you ask? He doesn't answer. Just says, you'll know when the silence gets too loud. Cryptic. But you don't push. Because you feel it too. That hum in your bones, rising not like music but like pressure. Something that wants out. Or maybe in. He tells you this part softly, almost a whisper. There's a final rite. Not a burial, exactly. But a choice. A chance to sever the breath completely. To leave the body as it is and walk in the echo. The echo is what remains when all sound has stopped but memory continues. You ask how. He gestures toward the chapel's back wall. There's a door you hadn't noticed before. Stone. Heavy. Unmarked. Beyond it, he says, is your last descent. You hesitate. Because the truth is, you never asked for any of this. You were just curious. You followed a tunnel. You touched a hatch. You opened a book. But now the breath is inside you. And the silence calls you by name. Outside, night continues. The wind shifts. And in that moment, you remember something from one of the early pages in the book. Something your eyes skimmed but your mind didn't register until now. Those who take the breath become bridges. 1 foot in the soil. 1 in the shadow. The weight must be shared. You rise. stone in hand, breathing steady, and you approach the door. Behind it, a hallway descends, not straight, but spiral. The walls are lined with masks. Not faces. Absences. Smooth, pale ovals without eyes or mouths. You understand what they mean. No identity. No speech. Only breath. You descend. The silence thickens. And with each step, the air changes. Not heavier. Not thinner. Just older. Like it remembers. And you, walking deeper, feel the breath move through you not as oxygen, but as permission. This is what you've been led to. Not to be buried, but to become the burial. The right walks you now. And at the bottom of the stair, where the walls curve into smooth darkness, you find the next door. One step left. But first, you must exhale. All of it. Everything. Are you ready? The last breath leaves you like a slow confession. No gasp. No drama. Just a quiet sigh drawn from somewhere deeper than lungs, further than memory. The door opens inward. Not with a creak or a groan, but with the sound of sand settling after wind. You step through, and the world beyond is not a room. Not a chamber. Not a tunnel. It is space. Wide. Empty. Not dark, but dim, like the inside of a closed eyelid. Everything bathed in a hush. The kind of hush you hear when you hold your breath under bathwater as a child and pretend you're diving into something ancient. Only this isn't pretend. Your feet make no sound as you walk forward. They don't echo. The ground is smooth, cool. Not stone, not earth. Something in between. Like packed ash. The air here doesn't move. It just is. And yet you're breathing. Or are you? You reach up to touch your chest, curious. No rise. No fall. No panic. Just calm. Complete. And suddenly you know, the final rite isn't about survival. It's about surrender. The kind of surrender no one trains you for. No ritual can fully prepare you for the moment when you accept that your body might just keep going, without you in it. Somewhere in this emptiness, a presence watches. Not hostile. Not warm. It waits like a mirror you haven't looked into yet. You take another step, and the floor beneath you ripples faintly. Like your weight is being acknowledged by something below. Then a second ripple. This one accompanied by a whisper, not in sound, but in thought. We remember. Not a greeting. A recognition. The presence knows you. Because you've walked the full breath. Buried yourself in layers, earth, silence, ritual, and memory. And now, here, you've surfaced again, beneath it all. This is where those who mastered the forgotten skill came not to hide, but to become. To shape their breath into something permanent. A living echo etched beneath the world. You look around, and you start to see the shapes. Not shadows. Not people. Outlines. Traces dozens. Hundreds. Figures standing still as statues, their outlines barely distinguishable from the mist around them. Some seated. Some upright. Some so faint they're more suggestion than presence. They are not dead. They are not alive. They are anchored. And you feel the choice rise in you like a tide. To join them. To stay here forever as a keeper of silence. To become part of the breath itself, no longer breathing in, but breathing out into the world above, subtly, gently, guiding those who seek the path. Or return. Climb. Leave this sanctuary of stillness, and carry the breath back with you. Teach it. Guard it. Or simply live with the knowledge that not all things buried are lost. And not all silence is emptiness. You kneel, placing the stone, the one the old man gave you, onto the floor. It sinks a little, like a key finding its lock. There is no sound. But you feel a door open somewhere. Not in the room. In you. And whatever choice you make next, is yours. You rise. And whether you step forward into the mist to join the others, or turn to climb back up the spiral stairs toward a world of sunlight and noise, you do it without fear. Because now, you know the secret. Breathing while buried alive was never about survival. It was about transformation. And you have been transformed. A vessel of quiet in a world too loud. A thread of ancient stillness stitched into modern chaos. You smile. Just a little. And vanish into the silence. Now, everything softens. The world you just walked through fades slowly, like mist on a morning field. You don't need to hold on to every detail. The quiet will remember for you. Let the silence settle. Let your breath slow, not forced, not trained, just natural. Like waves brushing the shore of your thoughts. You are not buried. You are held. By layers of earth and time, by old rites and forgotten stories, by the gentle hush that lives just beneath the noise of your day. That silence? It isn't empty. It's full of secrets that never needed shouting. Tonight, maybe you carry a piece of that stillness with you. Maybe tomorrow, when the world demands rush and volume and hurry, you'll remember that breath, that long, slow breath, that brought you to the edge and back. Maybe you'll even share it softly, with someone who needs it. But for now, you rest. No tunnels to crawl through. No dust on your tongue. Just stillness. And the faint, steady echo of your own heartbeat. A rhythm that says, you made it through. So breathe in. And breathe out. You're safe now.